For another special live show. I'm going to continue on tonight working on the Sony PVM 1943MD. First off, if you are joining me live, I want to say a special thank you. Make sure you do hit the thumbs up for me so that more people could have a chance to catch the stream. I'm going to go through what I've done so far. So last night, on the first stream, I broke down the monitor. I showed you a little bit how the adjustments work, and I broke it all down. And then where we left off last night was the boards were taken out of the shell, and then I've actually gone ahead and done some work to them. So I'll talk about the work I've done and the steps we're doing, and then I'll show you a little bit about how I built a specific cap kit for this monitor. But before I do that, right above me here, you'll notice these Sonic 2 kind of scrolling video up here up top. That is the 14N6U Sony PVM that is currently listed for sale. The sale ends in about 50 minutes. So again, if you did want to see how that all turns out, we'll be able to check that out in about 50 minutes. We'll go live and see what's going on with the sale. But in the meantime, we could go ahead, and try to take a break from everything that's really been going on outside of the walls of your house or wherever you may be watching this at the current time. And things are kind of crazy. And I just wanted to talk, about something that maybe could give everybody a break from the craziness that's on the normal television right now. So let's go ahead and get started looking at the parts I've got sitting right in front of me on the desk here. And I'll try to show them to you in the camera to my right. And we're going to go through and show you just some, again, close-ups. First off, what I'm showing you here on this is the neck board. And this neck board does have 3 capacitors on it. And I removed those capacitors already. So that was the work that I've done up to this point. I was going to show you kind of a spot here where I'm pointing at with my tweezers. That's a spot that was a capacitor that had been removed. And then there was one over here. And then finally a third one up top here. And so I removed all those. And let me show you the tool that I use to remove those. That would be this. And this is now one of the best tools that anyone who repairs these kind of things can buy. I noticed somebody's having some questions, so let's see here. Bakama. I'm going to kind of do this live stream, relaxing. So if there is something that you guys want to ask, and I happen to catch it with my eye, I might stop and answer your question. But if your PVM is whining, you have to check out your flyback and your anode cap. It's either that most likely, or it's a transformer. So the best advice would be to take the shell off, turn it on, try to isolate and find out where the sound is. It might be a vibration too. I've seen that happen in the past where something comes loose and just vibrates, but most likely it's your flyback. You might need to put some more grease. And I talked about that at the very end of the live stream last night, so if you want to go look back at that. Okay, so I'm going to open up this tool and show you. This is what I used to remove the solder to remove the capacitors on these boards. And I'll specifically show you why I use this, but it's a very handy tool. I've done a special episode reviewing it. And, this end right here just heats up. Yeah, I wouldn't whack the top, but that's pretty funny. I know what you mean. It's probably right there at the top where the anode cap is if you whack it and the sound stops. Okay, sorry. Back to what we're talking about here. This Hacko, again, this heats up. And I will tell you, these boards right here, this is a single-sided board. So, and since it's so old, I went with a setting of 2 on here, which according to this scale is right at 400 degrees Celsius or 750 degrees Fahrenheit. So you pretty much use that tool and you push it against the capacitor legs that you want to lift out of place. And it's very, very handy. And there is another option that is feasible on this monitor, and that would be something like this, which is a, it's a hot air machine. So there's a closer look at this hot air machine. It's pretty good. It's not a bad one. Works pretty good. But the problem with this hot air machine is if you used it on another monitor, like that has double-sided boards, you can really remove other components. And I feel like you got a better control if you learn how to use that nozzle correctly on this Hacko for these kind of jobs. Now, there is other jobs that's good for, but as far as like recapping these kind of things, I prefer to use that Hacko. So again, I removed the caps on this board, 3 on this board. Nothing really seemed to be wrong with those capacitors, but went ahead and changed them. And again, there was no cap list for this. So before I removed the capacitors, I recorded each value, and then I recorded the number and letter beside it on the component in the board where I removed it. So this next piece is the secondary part. So just to reconstruct this a little bit for you, this is going again on the back of the CRT, and then it plugs into the tube. And then right here, you've got this cable that actually goes right in here when it's put together, and the back of the flyback right there. And then the flyback has the anode cap, and it goes back into the back of the tube. This one has this special, trickle thing or whatever this is. I'm not really quite sure what it is completely. I can't remember. I know I had a discussion with somebody so long ago. But now, if you take a quick look at your flyback, it's pretty safe to look at it right the way it is. You will notice a potentiometer on here. Sometimes you'll have 2, but one of them will definitely be on here, and it says exactly what it adjusts right on top of it. If you see that right there, it says focus. So I don't know if you could see that or not, but I'm trying to make it to where you can possibly see it. It says focus on top of it, and that helps you clear up, if you have a blurry screen and your screens, you have to adjust this while it's turned on, but you could turn that potentiometer right to left to make your screen a little bit tighter. Now, I did change capacitors on this too, and so what I did was before I changed them, I would take it, and here, for example, this is the P board. So it says right here in the middle, Sony says Sony P board right there. In the center, it says P as in Paul. So I took that P board and I wrote down up top what the value was on a piece of paper. So I'll put like a C and then a number and then a value for the voltage and the microfarads on the capacitance. So that's a really archaic way to do it, but you have to do it if you can't find the service manual. And so when I removed the caps on here, I did notice that 2 of them, right where my fingers are, did appear to have left behind a little bit of a residue. So there's a possibility those were failing. And again, this is completely about preventive maintenance and extending the life of this monitor. So replacing these capacitors, even if they're still kind of good, is a good thing. So there's those 2 boards. And then one of the other boards I have sitting over here is not recapped at all. This is a daughter board to the main board. And let me see what this is, the BA. So every one of these boards is going to be marked BA or some kind of letter. So this board goes into the main chassis, which I'm going to go through here last. But that one, I did not recap this one. This one pretty much controls composite video, S-video, other comb features, things that are used as filters, etc., for composite video and S-video, pretty much. Everything else that's RGB does nothing to do with this board. So the last 2 boards are the more important boards. And I'll start with this one because I haven't removed every capacitor in it. There's still 2 big ones, and I wanted to see what the replacements came in. I'll definitely replace this one. But this one I wasn't too sure about yet. These are the bigger ones that are on limited stock, especially right now. But this one also costs about $7 in itself, which is like, a quarter of the cost of the entire cap kit. And the entire cap kit is 68 capacitors for the entire cap kit that I made. So anyway, there were 11 total capacitors on this board, and I removed all them. They don't appear to have any kind of wear, but just something that you can always check on this CRT and generally any CRT. Hey, Zion Farm. Thanks for joining me tonight. So you could check this if you have a dead CRT. This is the very first thing you want to check, okay? And that's this fuse. They're generally on the power supply. Sometimes they're clear like this one, and you can see if they're blown or not. They'll generally have a wire going through the center of it. And so if you see the wire, then you definitely have continuity most likely. But if that wire breaks, your PVM or CRT won't turn on at all. So you could do that. Now you can also check that with a multimeter, and you can do that by just putting your multimeter on continuity and checking to make sure you have continuity in there. So, but most of the time, if you have a dead power problem with your CRT, this is the best place to start. First, start with the fuse, and then you can start by replacing, and then next replace all the capacitors. That's what I generally recommend. Again, this will add a lot of life to your monitor because these are capacitors that are in a high heat area. There's these heat sinks here, so there's a lot of electrical current going through here, and it really heats up this board. And those capacitors get a lot of heat introduced into them. And then finally, last but definitely not least, I'm going to try to move this around so you can actually see the parts on it and maybe see the other things that I've been working on. So first off, on this main board, I wanted to show you that I mentioned this daughter board first off, right here, and that goes in right there normally. So that's where that normally fits in. There's a couple of slots right there, and it just slips in there like a video card, and whoops, you just push it in. So it'll be fine though. So that's where that is normally. And then if we look at it, where my hand is back here, this section is the section that would be, the buttons of the monitor would be, for example, right here in front of this. And then this is behind where our video card is and our video board. And these are the sides, obviously. Now, when you look at this board specifically, there is an actual line that goes through it, and it's a solid white line, and it maps out which areas are considered to be your high temperature areas. And I'll try to get up and bring this closer to the camera so that you can see it a little bit better. Maybe you can see the line that I'm talking about. I'll get this Sharpie so I can use it too and show you what I've done. So the line starts, excuse me, the line starts right here at the end of my marker, right next where it says HV black. So it goes up here and it continues on right through the middle of the board, and then it kind of zigs over here and zags back over here right behind these two heat sinks. Right behind the two heat sinks up here, and then crosses back over to this connection and back over to this connection and back off here. So the way I developed this cap kit for this monitor is I went in here, and everything that was on the deflection or hot side of this board is the capacitors that I changed. Now I could go in and spend another, $70 and hours and time and replace every capacitor in here. But most of these over in this area have passed the general inspection. And again, there were no problems with the monitor. I just want to change the ones that are most likely going to, need to be changed. So we're going to stick with this approach for this monitor. And unless, somebody custom requests it, most of the time, my philosophy is that you can do this type of a upgrade to a monitor and it'd still be very, very good. You'll see the most. If you did the rest of this, you wouldn't see as much of a benefit as if you did this. And so we follow that line, and again, I've removed every capacitor to this side of the line, except for one. That is one that I couldn't find in resource. It's a 0.22 microfarad tiny capacitor specialty over here, and it's so tiny. I'm not going to remove it and try to do anything with it. You might be able to up it to a 0.47 if you really had to change it and it was dead, but I recommend just keeping that one in there. And the rest of them, there are 48 in just this single board. So this is the majority of the work. And again, that's just half of this board, maybe a little bit less than half of this board. So what I did was I went through, and just like in the other boards, I took this marker, I made a mark on top of every single capacitor after I wrote down on these papers here. I wrote down, again, I'll show it to you real quick. I wrote down which capacitor spot goes where and what the value was for that particular capacitor. And then I double checked it as I removed the capacitors. So after I went through and marked every one of them with the black mark, and I had them all written down here on my papers, then what I did was I took out the tool I just showed you, the Hacko, and I removed every single one off the board. And as I removed them, I would double check them with my list to make sure that I had pulled the right board or the right cap, I had the right value, and I did. And so that's a way to double check what the work you did. That's always a good thing to do. And so after I did that, I removed all those capacitors. I thought I'd just show you, the capacitors here real quick that I did remove. So this is a bag of the capacitors that were the ones from the power supply and the other boards like the neck board and the flyback board. And then this alone is the big bag of 48 capacitors that came out of this board by itself. So I'll keep all these just in case I have any troubles with the new caps that I put into this board. I'll keep those in case I need to use one of those again. And again, these are good in case you get to an emergency time when you don't have any other capacitors. You can always test these with a multimeter. And if they test out, you could use them if you're in a tight bind and you need to use old capacitors. Now, if not, they are completely safe, to throw away if you want to, because there's no biohazardous material in there. It's all just fish oil. So the next thing I did was after I removed those capacitors and I had them all written down, that's kind of the step we're at now. So I have, the boards here, the capacitors are gone. I'll clean it all off a little bit before or after I replace the capacitors. They're pretty well clean now. But once I had my list of, capacitors that I had handwritten, I went through and I took a couple of sheets and I tallied up all, and I constantly get asked this, but I tallied up all the different capacitors on the board then from the cap list here. I took all of them and I started from the lowest value, which was, for example, 16 volt. Then I went up to 25 volt, and I just, organized them that way and increased, but I put down every single capacitor and a tick mark next to it based off these lists here. And then that way I could make an order sheet from this. I could take these tick marks and go through and individually order all these capacitors. And I did that. And then at the same time, I also printed or, typed all the different, I went from this paper that I had just written and I typed it up in Microsoft Word. And then there you can go and see the A board, for example. There's every one of my capacitors in my kit. Now, I did consolidate some of these values. For example, there was one capacitor on this list that was a 10 volt 47 microfarad capacitor. So I took that capacitor and this other, there was a lot of other 16 volt 47 microfarad capacitors in this kit and just one 10 volt. So since that's just a small voltage increase, it's safe to do. So I just would increase that voltage and on there and replace that 10 volt capacitor with the 16 volt. And so then I would go change it on my cap kit. So that's how I developed kind of the cap kit. And so that puts us at the position we're at kind of right now, where I've removed everything, and now I've gone through and kind of double-checked a lot of other stuff with a quality control kind of a check. And I'm waiting for the cap kit to come in because I was able to get this order sent out and processed today, and I was able to get it shipped off. So it should be here, they said, by Tuesday, hopefully, end of the day. And so that should be there. And so, if you want to, guys, I'm going to take a little bit of time now to, answer some questions if you have any. I did have a couple questions that people had sent me about this particular CRT and maybe repair on some other CRTs. So you can leave those in the chat, and I'll get to them. It looks like we got one right here from Bakhama644 again. I just ordered Permatex. Yes, that's the good stuff. That's the lubricant that is the dielectric grease. That's the best you can use. Yes, you should clean out the old stuff. And the way to do that is to take any old soft, non-abrasive towel and wipe it out. You could use a paper towel or even like an old t-shirt or sock or something and wipe it all off. Just get rid of all the old stuff and wipe that whole area up there just very gently and get as much of it off as possible. And then take a look at your anode cap too. And you might have to clean off the inside of it right here. And again, you just wipe it off, but just make sure you don't leave any microfibers or hairs or anything inside here or dust, because that's what causes crackles, is dust getting in here and reacting with the arc on there. And so you'll want to clean out this. And then when you go back, you'll see this, and I've done it in other videos, but on this, you'd, for instance, rub that Permatex on the black part inside of the anode cap, as well as the prongs that are pushed together, the actual metal. And then you also do the same thing, rub some of that on the outside of the anode cup on the back of the anode, connection point on the back of the tube. And then you can, smooth that around and attach this to that, and that's exactly how you do it. You don't need to overdo it, but you're not going to overdo it most likely. Just do that and make sure you press and got a good seal and good suction against the back of your tube. So if you have any other questions, let me know. I'm going to go up real quickly and go over here and change this monitor for a second. And this again is the 14N6U. I'm going to change it over to, I've got it on now, is just, again, the 240p test suite. But I also have 480i in here, and this is just on Composite. And I wanted to pick something that wouldn't get me a copyright flag, and G.I. Joe tends to be pretty good about not doing that. So this is the 480i picture, and I wanted to show this specifically because you'll often hear people talk about how the 480i looks, not as good on a higher line count CRT. And so that can be true, but also I wanted to show you that it actually can look a lot better on something like this N series CRT that only has 500 lines, on a 14-inch screen. I wanted to show you how good Composite can look, even if it's just, Composite can look, 480i can look, even if it's just in Composite for video. So it really looks good. Let me see, I got some over here. Do you ever replace smaller value electrolytic caps with film caps? No, I've not actually tried that, Brian. Brian Reno asked, do you ever replace smaller value caps, electrolytic caps with film caps? Which I'm guessing would be, that might be what I'd have to do if I wanted to change that 0.22 microfarad capacitor on this main board. But I've not tried that, so I don't really know. Now, another question that I did get, again, a few times is this contraption. And I don't honestly, I don't know what Sony'd use this for. You know, if I was going to guess, this is just a guess, I would think that this is maybe an early form of how they could discharge the tube automatically. You know, maybe after you turn it off, it would automatically ground itself out and bleed out the energy. So if anybody knows about that, please feel free to comment. But I can't even remember. I used to talk to people because they'd always tell me that they were just looking for this part because theirs would crack. Because, again, this one is inside this monitor in Sony 2030, Sony 2030 PVMs. So now I'm going to take a look just real quick over here and see if anything's changed on there. Nothing's changed on there, so we're still at the same. Got about 27 minutes left on the bids for that monitor, the 14N6U. So if you want to go take a look at that, you just get on eBay and look up Sony PVM, and you will find it because it's going to end soon, so it'll be on auction. There's one more thing I can mention about that Sony PVM 2030, and that's this part, or not the 2030, I'm sorry, the 1943, which again, if you use like a 1944Q, that's very similar. It's going to be like 95% similar to this monitor. But that's this plate, which originally held the flyback board over here, and then this would have been the back of this board right here, actually. This would have gone just like this in there, and that's the way it will go back together. But this board has the audio video input board, and I'm not actually doing any service work to this board. This is a QE board, but I'll show it to you so we can take a quick look at some of the stranger inputs, because this one does have some different inputs that were discontinued. Obviously, you've got a line A for just composite video through BNC, looped in and out up here, and this is just line A. And then line B is over here. You got audio again, and you also got an S video input right here for the line B. And then this is a VTR, which is a kind of interesting, weird proprietary thing, but it says you could put digital RGB too through this one, which it's not really a digital RGB like you might think, or like we could actually use. This is a really old school format that really was not used. It's not similar to the digital RGB that we use today, I don't believe. So that's really useless as well for this VTR. It's not like you get any quality improvement on using any of these, but they are there. You also have a color temperature, just toggle switch right back here. So you do have two color temperatures on there. V-hold control. So if you're scrolling, your picture scrolling, that's how you would adjust that. What else we got back there? Horizontal center. So you could even adjust the horizontal centerness. There's like 3 different potentiometers on this monitor to adjust horizontal center. And then down here we've got our RGB input, RGB sync. And There is no support on this monitor, just like the 14N6U. There's no support for RGB. So that's something that you need to make yourself aware of. There's no support for RGB. And this one does have a mono audio speaker, but again, it only works on on the other video formats like Composite and S-Video. All right, so if anybody else has any questions, feel free to leave them. I'm just going to check the stuff real quick. And so, if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything, just let me know. I'm just going to hang out here for a little while, and if there's anything else I could think about to talk about on this job, I'll bring it up. Basically, the plan will be to have this capacitor kit finished and put together. Then, you can either get a copy of this for yourself, or if it works, get a copy or get the full kit. Well, I should talk about one thing that I almost forgot about. Well, I've got some extra time, and that is this. That's this board right here, which is the power supply board. This was one of the first capacitors I've worked on. It's over here. I'll try to show it to you. And it's right here. I don't know how good you can see this. But if you look really closely, maybe pause it for a second and try to look right there. That trace around that capacitor leg just completely melted when I put the hot on there, the hot end of the desoldering tool. It just pretty much disintegrated about 80%. So you got to be careful not to ground that thing against anything. I didn't even ground it against it. Just pretty much melted right off when I put the hot on there. All right. Zion Farm. So the way I do the cap lists is this. You can email me, and I can provide you with a capacitor kit for, they're just, most of the time, they're $60 shipped, and then they go up to, like, this one will be a little bit more because it has, again, 68 capacitors. So it would be, like almost $90 shipped. So you're looking between $60 and $90 shipped for something this big. And that's what I do is I sell through email. Or like a 14M4U, yeah, that would be about $65 for that kit. It's just a standard kit. You've got a power supply in that monitor just like this, and it will completely cover that power supply, which can have anywhere between 14 to 17 capacitors in that version. So it'll cover this entire board, and then the main chassis on that monitor, for example, it will cover 20, I want to say it's like 26 capacitors on there. And I think that's about right, because I think the whole kit's about 41 capacitors. So it's right in there in the middle. Something like a 1954 or a 1953 or 2054, 2053, those have about the least amount of caps. And then a kit for something like a 2030 that I don't have a power supply kit for. Those are on the lower end cost, maybe even less than that. If you want to just get a capacitor list, I can also provide you with just a PDF of the list for, just a channel donation of at least $5 per capacitor kit. So, just send me that and I can email you a copy of that. And you can make your own kits with your own choice of capacitors. I use 100% Nichicon when I can, or Rubicon if I can't get that. And this is a service that I do offer. And I'll be completely honest with you. Let's talk a second about like the price on something like this. This kind of a job is quite expensive because it's going to take a lot of time to take this apart, and everything's manually adjusted. So if you send a monitor like this one to me, you're looking on the higher end, where if I had to do exactly what I'm doing, where I'm changing 68, I'm sorry, capacitors. That's going to probably run you about, goodness, $330 probably. I mean, I'm just trying to say that's about how much the parts would be included in that. And that's just the service fee for me to do everything from pretty much fully restore it. Now, other models would be a little bit less, but they're pretty much going to be around that much money, not much difference. $300 is a pretty good idea for, how much it costs to completely restore. If you wanted to do less, yeah, the $65, for example, is getting a list. You would get a sheet of paper like this, and then you would get a bag like this, and it would have all the capacitors for your monitor in it and the key for where they go in there. So that would be for that money. Like I said, I can give you just the list for a channel donation. Yeah, if you could do it yourself, that's really the best way. That's why I do my channel, guys. The best thing to do is if you can do these yourself, you're gonna save the most money. You're gonna have fun. I really like doing the repairs as much as doing anything because it's really rewarding to be able to get in there, fix a CRT. So yeah, it's pretty legit. So if you guys got any more questions, please leave them below. We got about, still got about 20 minutes before this auction ends. And I don't really have much more to talk about as far as this monitor is going. So we could just leave it up here and kind of talk a little bit more about the 14N6U. But again, this one has every capacitor except for one capacitor changed in it. And the one capacitor I did change was a big one like this. And it was one that I couldn't get because it was on back order. Yeah, my email address is snutt541@gmail.com. So let me type that in real quick, and then I'll put it down here, and you could send me an email to request more info, and then I'll follow up with you after the stream. So that's my email if you want to reach out to me. And, I'm sorry. A lot of people send me questions through my email and through Facebook. And I'm sorry, I just don't have time. I haven't had time really to answer a lot of them. And a lot of people spend a lot of time writing requests and stuff. And I just can't get to every one of them. But send me an email and we'll look at that. You can get cap kits. I've got cap kits right now for, everything that's got like a 50. So if you've got a 1350, 1450, 1351, I think there's a 53, 54, and so that's 13 or 19 inch. Hey, Mark, good to see you. And so if you take those, we've just been going through and looking at the PVM 1943 restoration and kind of where we're at, but I've got kits for those. And then, of course, the M series, I've got kits for all those. And that's pretty much it for right now. I don't think I'm going to have kits for like the L series anytime soon. It just depends, Zion. Don't send that till, if you're inside the United States, then that is 65 shipped, okay? But if you're outside the country, it would be more if I had to ship it somewhere else. So just, if it is in the United States, that's the correct amount. So yeah, if you live in the U.S., just put your address in there, and you can go ahead and send that to that email, and I can process that for you probably over the weekend. They'll generally ship those kits out to me Monday, so it would be a couple days, but then I get it shipped out to you once it gets to me on Wednesday, most likely. But the kits would come with a guide and then the actual capacitors. Okay, then you're good to go. $65 would be good for that one. Now, those prices can change from time to time. It just depends on the price of the capacitors, because sometimes I have to go through there and change them. It doesn't vary very often and very much, but I don't know how that's all going to change coming up, because a lot of these capacitors are made outside of the United States, so I don't know how that shipping is going to work going forward. But okay, yeah, you're fine then. Be careful over there. Thanks for your service to us, Zion. So, getting up here where we're about 20 minutes, a little bit less. Let's see. We're at, well, so we're right at, how much time left? Right at well, this has gone up to $500 for the monitor right now. So, but anyway, whoever gets this, if you do get it, and you wind up getting this 14N6U, at this point, I will include a complimentary SCART to RGB adapter. Let me show you. I've got one right over here. This is one I did make a video, probably 8 months ago, on how to make these, and then not only just how to make them, but how the right way to make them and how to order the parts to get them. But I'll include one of these now, so I don't know if you're even here, whoever ends up getting it, but I will include. Oh, great. All right.